Welcome to my channel. Tonight's story is called The Alien Doctors Panicked at His Injuries, but the human just smiled and said, "That's nothing. Sit back, relax, and imagine the cold hum of a starship drifting through deep space, where pain means something very different for humanity." The alarms blared across the medical deck of the Galactic Council flagship Seraphian, its sterile corridors lit by flickering white light. Inside the med bay, a group of alien physicians worked frantically around a single figure on the table. The air shimmered with the scent of antiseptic gas and ionized blood. Their patient wasn't one of their own, it was a human. Commander Ryan Voss, Terran Expeditionary Corps, pulled from the wreckage of a downed ship after surviving an orbital crash. The aliens had never treated a human before. They thought he'd be dead on arrival. Instead, he was awake, calm, and watching them through half-open eyes, his breathing steady even as the scanner projected the impossible. 17 fractures, internal bleeding, 3 ruptured organs, and a spinal crack that should have left him paralyzed. The chief surgeon, a four-eyed Zalari physician, stared at the readings, trembling. This cannot be right," he whispered. The others murmured in panic, their voices filled with disbelief. "His pain threshold is beyond measurable. How is he still conscious?" And through all the noise, Ryan Voss chuckled softly, his voice low and rough. "Relax, Doc," he said. "That's nothing." The med bay fell silent. Every alien I turned toward him, unable to process the words. They were doctors, trained in every species' biology, but they had never seen a creature so broken, yet so alive. Hours earlier, Ryan's ship, the Resolute Dawn, had been hit by Council crossfire in what they called a peacekeeping misunderstanding. Humanity's new colonies were growing fast, and the Council, fearing what they couldn't control, had cut supply routes, enforcing sanctions. But humans never obeyed quietly. The Terran fleet had pushed back, forcing a standoff at the edge of neutral space. Ryan's ship had been sent to negotiate, unarmed, peaceful, but someone panicked. A single Council drone fired, and his ship went down in flames. He was the only survivor, drifting for hours in a damaged escape pod until the same Council forces who shot him found him and dragged him aboard. They expected a corpse, not a soldier who sat upright and said, "Got room for one more?" Now, lying on their med table, he looked like a man carved from war itself, scarred, bleeding, but unbroken. The alien doctors whispered to each other, trying to understand how his nervous system could still function. "He should be in shock," one muttered. "He should be screaming." But Ryan only smiled. "You haven't met my drill sergeant," he said quietly, before closing his eyes and resting as if the pain was an afterthought. The Zalari surgeon approached him cautiously. "Human, do you understand your condition? You have multiple skeletal failures. You should not be able to move, speak, or even breathe." Ryan's voice was faint but steady. "Try growing up on a mining colony, Doc. Gravity 3 times what you're used to, air so thin your lungs burn every morning. You either toughen up or die trying." The alien blinked, his mind struggling to grasp the words. "You evolved to endure suffering?" Ryan gave a weak grin. "No, we learned to ignore it." The med team fell silent again. They had fought wars across 1,000 systems, seen creatures who could regenerate limbs or breathe fire, but they had never encountered a species that treated agony like an inconvenience. They thought humanity's reputation was myth, stories told by mercenaries who exaggerated. But here, before them, was living proof that the stories were not enough. When word of the human's survival reached the upper decks, the Council observers requested immediate transfer for interrogation. The order came cold and efficient. "Do not let him die until he speaks." But Ryan Voss was no spy, no diplomat. He was a soldier who'd seen what the galaxy did to those it couldn't control. He knew the Council feared humanity not because of their strength, but because of their persistence. When other species surrendered, humans rebuilt. When others mourned their dead, humans buried their grief under laughter and went back to work. Pain was not their enemy. It was their companion. That was why he had smiled at the doctors. Not arrogance, not defiance, just understanding. Pain meant he was still alive. Hours later, when the council's security arrived, the med bay lights dimmed again. The alien officers wore polished armor, their movements sharp and precise. The chief medic protested. He cannot be moved. His bones. The officer silenced him with a glare. He's human. He'll survive. Ryan opened one eye and said dryly, "Glad to know your confidence in me hasn't dropped." They strapped him to a hover stretcher, but as they lifted him, the ship suddenly jolted. A distant explosion rocked the hull. The alarms wailed again, but this time it wasn't a drill. Through the shaking walls came the echo of human engines. A Terran rescue fleet had arrived. The alien guards panicked. Impossible! They weren't supposed to find us. Ryan's voice cut through the chaos, hoarse but steady. You underestimated them. The officer hissed. Your fleet won't risk war to save one soldier. Ryan met his gaze with that same tired smile. That's where you're wrong. We don't leave anyone behind. Moments later, the hull breached. Bright blue light filled the corridor as Terran Marines stormed in, their armor black and scarred, moving with machine precision. "Commander Voss," one of them said, kneeling beside the stretcher. "We've got you, sir." Ryan grinned weakly. "Took you long enough." The alien doctors watched in stunned silence as the humans lifted their broken commander as if he weighed nothing. They noticed the soldiers bore wounds of their own, burns, cuts, missing limbs replaced by crude cybernetics, but not one of them showed pain. The lead medic whispered, "How can they still fight like this?" The old Zalari surgeon answered softly, "Because they were born from a world that never stopped hurting them, and somehow they learned to love it." The Marines secured Ryan aboard their ship, retreating as plasma fire rained down from the Council's fleet. The Terran captain's voice thundered over comms. "For every human they break, 100 more rise." The Resolute fleet's engines roared, dragging the wounded commander and his rescuers back into the safety of deep space. Weeks later, Ryan awoke in a human med bay. The machines around him hummed softly, and a familiar nurse grinned. 17 broken bones, 3 organs rebuilt, and you still look like you'd walk it off. He smiled faintly. "I would've if you'd given me boots." She laughed, shaking her head. "Command says the Council's panicking. They've seen what one human can survive. They're afraid of what a billion could endure." Ryan stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. "They should be," he whispered. "We don't fight for power. We fight because we don't know how to stop." He closed his eyes, the hum of the engines reminding him of home. A home humanity had built from dust and defiance. Out in the galaxy, the story spread like wildfire. Alien medics who had seen him whispered of the human who smiled through agony. Soldiers spoke of the Terrans who never surrendered, even when their bones shattered. And the Galactic Council, for all its might, began to whisper the same fear across every system. If pain cannot stop them, what can? Humanity had earned a new name among the stars. The Unbroken. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more HFY and sci-fi stories about humanity, courage, and the mysteries of the galaxy. The alien medics could not rest that night. The human was stabilized, but their minds were not. The Zalari surgeon paced before the monitor wall, his eyes darting across the endless streams of data. "He should not be alive," he whispered to himself. His heart rate never faltered. He lost 30% of his blood. Any other being would have been gone within minutes. His assistant spoke in hushed tones, analyzing every scan, replaying the footage of the crash again and again. The medical bay was filled with a strange tension, a mix of awe and dread, as if they had witnessed something sacred. The youngest of them, a timid Nael medic, stared at the human through the observation glass. "He smiles in his sleep," she said softly. "Even now, like the pain means nothing." The chief turned sharply. "Pain is universal," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Not for them," she replied. Outside, the Seraphian drifted through the dark of space, silent and wounded, her hull scarred by the same battle that had broken the human below. Across the ship, whispers spread. A human had survived what would have killed any of them. Even the council observers, cold and logical, were unsettled. Humanity had always been a rumor to them, a race that defied logic, driven by emotion and madness. But now that rumor had a face and it was breathing. When Commander Ryan Voss awoke again, the room was dim and silent. He felt the dull ache of his reconstructed bones, the weight of the bandages, and the familiar hum of an alien med unit beside him. For a long moment, he just stared at the ceiling, tracing the thin silver lights that pulsed above. Then he chuckled softly. Still not dead. Guess I'm disappointing someone. His voice startled the Nael medic, who was monitoring him quietly. She blinked, her translucent skin glowing faintly in surprise. You should be asleep, she said nervously. You require rest. He turned his head, his expression calm, almost amused. Rest is for people who plan to stop moving. She hesitated. Do all humans talk like this? He smiled faintly. Only the ones who lived long enough to regret it. She didn't understand the humor, but the tone disarmed her. For the first time since the crash, someone on that ship looked at him not as a subject to study, but as something alive. Still, curiosity burned inside her. When the scanners revealed your injuries, our physicians panicked. They said your body was shutting down. Ryan exhaled slowly. Yeah, it usually tries that. We just don't let it. Her brow furrowed. You resist death? No, he said softly. We bargain with it. Up on the bridge, the council's representative arrived. A tall, silver-skinned official named Draylen, whose voice carried the cold authority of 10,000 years of bureaucracy. He reviewed the human's file, eyes narrowing at the data. His biology is chaotic. Redundant organs, dense muscle fibers, primitive design. The captain of the Seraphian, a cautious Relien with glassy eyes, dared to reply. Primitive, yes, but effective. Draylen glanced at him. You sound impressed. I'm terrified, the captain said simply. He survived a crash that vaporized half our deck. If one human can endure that. He trailed off, unable to finish. Draylen's expression hardened. The council will decide what to do with him. Keep him contained. But containment was never something humanity accepted for long. Days passed, and Ryan's recovery became the ship's quiet obsession. He refused most pain suppressants, claiming they made him feel disconnected. He exercised his damaged limbs far sooner than advised, gritting through the agony with a dry smile that unnerved his caretakers. The alien doctors began to document everything. His muscle regeneration, his nerve resilience, the strange way his body refused to surrender to exhaustion. One night, when the lights dimmed for ship's rest cycle, the Nael medic returned to find him standing beside his bed. One arm braced against the wall for balance. You shouldn't move, she gasped. He shrugged. If I don't, the muscles forget. You will reopen your wounds. Then I'll fix them again. She didn't understand how someone could speak so lightly about pain. Her people wept at the smallest injury. His species treated near-death like an inconvenience. Rumors reached him through overheard whispers. The council wanted to interrogate him about humanity's military capabilities. Some believed humans were bred for war. Others claimed they were the descendants of an extinct race of predators. Ryan never bothered to correct them. Let them think what they wanted. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Humanity had learned to survive because no one else would do it for them. Their world had tried to kill them 1,000 ways. Storms, famine, war, and still they built cities from the ashes. Pain was not their weakness. It was their teacher. When the doctors finally allowed him a communication device, he used it not to call for help but to send a single, encrypted message into the void. Still breathing, still waiting. Somewhere across the stars, his fleet would receive it. The alien crew began to treat him differently after that. Fear slowly turned into respect, and respect into quiet fascination. They asked him questions not about weapons but about humanity itself. Why do you keep fighting? One of them asked during a checkup. Because we have to, he replied. If we don't, someone else decides who we are. They didn't understand at first. In their world, the council decided everything: laws, lives, futures. To them, obedience was survival. To humans, obedience was death. Ryan's words spread through the corridors like forbidden scripture. Some laughed at the idea that pain could be a source of pride. Others whispered that the human strength came from something far older, a will that even the architects themselves couldn't design. Then, on the 7th night after his crash, the Seraphian dropped out of warp. Ryan could feel the shift in the ship's vibration, the change in air pressure, the way the deck creaked differently. He sat up immediately. "We've stopped moving," he said. The medic looked at him, startled. "You can sense that?" "Humans always feel when something stops working," he said. Moments later, alarms sounded again. The captain's voice echoed over the intercom. "Council security detail inbound. Prepare the prisoner for transfer." The medics froze. "Transfer?" Ryan asked quietly. "Where?" None answered, but he already knew. The council didn't want to study him anymore. They wanted to silence the story before it spread. As the guards approached, he smiled faintly and said, "I told you I'd walk out of here." And when they came through the door, armed and ready, the human stood on his broken legs, bandages soaked through with blood, and greeted them with that same maddening calm. "Gentlemen," he said, "if you're here to escort me, you'll have to keep up." For a moment, the aliens hesitated, not because of his strength, but because of his voice. There was no fear in it, no pain, just purpose. The same purpose that made humanity so dangerous. Somewhere deep in the ship, the hum of distant engines grew louder, as if the stars themselves were listening. The metal doors of the med bay opened with a hiss that echoed down the corridor like the breath of a predator, and four armored council guards stepped in, their weapons trained on the broken human standing barefoot on the cold deck. Commander Ryan Voss didn't flinch. His bones still ached from the fractures, his muscles burned with every breath, but his eyes were steady, dark, alive, defiant. The lead guard, a towering reptilian Vyrek, pointed a plasma rifle at him. "By order of the Galactic Council, you are to be transferred for security debrief and containment." Ryan tilted his head slightly, the ghost of a smile flickering across his lips. "Containment? That's a fancy word for prison." The alien sneered. "Your survival has caused unrest. Some of our species are calling you a symbol of defiance. The Council cannot allow that." Ryan's voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. "Maybe that's your problem. You think survival is rebellion." The Vyrek raised his weapon, but the chief surgeon stepped forward nervously. "He's still injured. Moving him could kill him." Ryan chuckled under his breath. "Doc, if they haven't killed me yet, they're not going to manage it by walking me down a hallway." The guards shackled his hands, but the human didn't resist. He let them believe he was beaten. It was easier that way. Humanity had always known how to play weak until it mattered. The corridors of the Seraphian stretched out like veins of polished steel, cold and gleaming. Alien officers stopped to stare as the human passed, their expressions unreadable, some fearful, some curious. The story had already spread across the ship. The human who wouldn't break. Ryan caught fragments of whispers. He walked with broken bones. He smiled through the scans. He should be dead. To most of them, pain was a thing to flee from. To him, it was a reminder that he was still alive. As the guards escorted him to the shuttle bay, the ship shuddered faintly, as though something large had dropped out of warp nearby. The lead officer stopped, eyes narrowing. "Status report." He barked into his comm. Static answered him, followed by a faint human voice on the open channel. "This is Captain Monroe of the Terran Command Fleet. You have something that belongs to us." The alien guards froze, their skin paling. "Impossible," one muttered. "They couldn't have tracked us through the rift." Ryan's smile widened slightly. "You really think we'd let our people vanish quietly?" The officer slammed his weapon into Ryan's back, shoving him forward. "Silence!" The human stumbled, then straightened, still smirking. "That's the problem with you council types," he said. "You never learn to listen." Outside, in the endless dark of space, the Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace like wolves breaking through fog. Sleek black ships, scarred from battle, surrounded the Seraphian in perfect formation. Every hull bore the mark of Earth Command, a single silver star over a burning flame. The alien crew stared at their scanners in disbelief. "They're hailing us," one officer said, his voice shaking. "They're demanding we release the human or face engagement." The captain's voice trembled with uncertainty. "We are a medical vessel. They wouldn't fire." The Zalari surgeon, watching from a nearby terminal, whispered, "They will not fire first, but they will not back down." In the shuttle bay, alarms began to wail as the security lights flickered red. The guards tightened their grip on Ryan, but he was already watching the hangar doors with quiet satisfaction. He knew the Terrans. He had served with them long enough to understand what their silence meant. When humanity stopped talking, it was already too late. The hangar's blast doors shook under the force of an external impact, a boarding magnet locking into place. Then came the sound that made even hardened soldiers freeze. The low thrum of Terran drop pods breaching the hull. Smoke and sparks filled the air as metal screamed against metal. The guards raised their weapons, shouting orders in panic, but Ryan just stood there, bloodied and calm. "You might want to lower those," he said softly. "They don't take kindly to people pointing guns at their own." A deafening crash cut him off as the door blew open, and 3 Terran Marines stormed through, clad in heavy exo-armor that gleamed under the harsh light. Their visors reflected the aliens' terrified faces. "Commander Voss located," one of them said into his comm, voice deep and mechanical. "Alive, though pissed off as usual." Ryan grinned, wincing as he raised a trembling hand. "You're late. Had to stop for fuel," the Marine quipped, stepping forward to unshackle him. The guards tried to intervene, but the Marines moved faster, knocking them aside with precise, efficient force. Within seconds, the human commander was free. "Can you walk, sir?" one asked. Ryan took a slow, shaky breath, then nodded. "Walking's easy. It's the stopping that hurts." As the team prepared for extraction, a transmission came through the ship's intercom. The alien captain's voice, desperate. "Terran vessels, stand down. We are under Council protection. You are violating." The line cut out as another explosion rocked the hull. Ryan turned to his rescuers. "Tell Monroe to aim low. I don't want anyone dead if we can help it." The lead Marine hesitated. "Sir, they shot us down." Ryan's eyes hardened. "And we'll show them what separates us from them. We don't kill for pride. We fight for our own." The Marine nodded grimly. Moments later, the Terran boarding team led him through the smoke-filled corridors. Aliens scattered at the sight of them, some out of fear, others out of respect. The Nael medic from the med bay stood frozen as Ryan passed, her hands trembling. He paused for a heartbeat, meeting her gaze. "Thanks for patching me up," he said softly. She swallowed hard. You were never afraid." He smiled faintly. "Sure I was. I just got used to it." Then he was gone, swallowed by the chaos. Outside, in the cold dark, the Seraphian drifted between the human and Council fleets. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Then the voice of Captain Monroe echoed across all open frequencies. "This is Earth Command. We came for one of ours. You can fire if you wish, but understand this. You can kill a man, not a species." The silence that followed stretched for an eternity. The Council ships hesitated, their weapons charged but unmoving. And then, one by one, they powered down. The sight burned into every alien eye watching, the moment when the galaxy realized that humanity's greatest weapon was not its ships or guns, but its will. Back aboard the Terran flagship Resolute, Ryan stood on unsteady legs as medics swarmed around him. "Commander, your vitals are unstable. Please lie down," one insisted. He ignored them, looking instead at the viewscreen showing the Council fleet retreating into the void. "They'll come again," he murmured. Captain Monroe nodded beside him. "Let them. This time they'll think twice." Ryan leaned back, his voice low and tired. "They won't understand what we are." Monroe looked at him. "Then tell me, Ryan, what are we?" He smiled faintly, eyes half closing. We're the pain that never quits, the scar that doesn't fade. We're humanity, and we're not done yet. The stars beyond the viewport flickered like embers in an endless fire, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy realized that fear could no longer control them. Humanity had come too far, lost too much, and endured too long to bow again. And somewhere deep in that quiet dark, alien doctors who had once panicked at the sight of a broken man now whispered a different word when they spoke of him. They called him what the humans had always been called among the stars, unbreakable. When the smoke of battle cleared, the stars above seemed quieter than before, as if the universe itself were holding its breath in disbelief. The Galactic Council had retreated in shame, their fleet humiliated by a species they once called primitive, and yet the aftershock of that moment rippled across every world that listened. For the first time in living memory, alien broadcasts spoke the same words in a dozen tongues. The human lived. On Alindra, on Vyrek Prime, on the crystal moons of Taller, the story spread like a fever. A man with 17 broken bones had stood, smiled, and walked out of captivity while the council watched. The medical records leaked through black market data streams. Every scan, every heartbeat, every impossible statistic became proof of what many had refused to believe, that humanity's endurance defied biology itself. Within days, the tale was no longer about one soldier. It was about an entire race that treated agony as a challenge and fear as fuel. Alien scholars debated how a soft-bodied mammal could outlast their engineered warriors. Priests called it divine punishment for the Council's arrogance. Soldiers called it hope. And somewhere aboard the Terran flagship Resolute, Commander Ryan Voss lay in recovery, listening to distant transmissions that spoke his name like a myth. He hated the attention, but deep inside he knew this story wasn't his anymore. It belonged to every human who had ever crawled through the dirt and kept moving. Across the void, on the damaged Seraphian, the alien doctors sat together in silence. The Nael medic who had tended Ryan played the human's last words again on her recorder. "You haven't met my drill sergeant." Each time she heard it, she felt something she could not name. The chief surgeon finally broke the silence. "Our textbooks said the human pain threshold ends at 60 units. He endured 212. The others stared at him, waiting for logic that would never come. He continued softly. "Their species was never supposed to reach the stars, yet they did. And now I wonder if we are the ones who misunderstood evolution." When the council demanded his full report, the old doctor refused. "I will not lie," he told them. "They are not monsters. They are mirrors." His defiance cost him his position, but his words spread faster than punishment. Young medics began studying human biology, curious to know what willpower looked like under a microscope. They found nothing extraordinary. No secret organ, no enhanced tissue, just ordinary cells. But they began to realize the truth. What made humans different wasn't in their flesh. It was in their refusal to yield. Weeks turned to months, and Ryan recovered slowly under Terran care. He spent long hours staring out the viewport, watching the fractured light of nebulae drift by like smoke. Sometimes Captain Monroe joined him. "The Council still denies it," Monroe said one night. "They call you propaganda." Ryan smiled without looking away. "Let them. Truth has a way of outliving lies." Soon, messages began arriving from alien colonies asking for Terran envoys, miners, engineers, medics, not soldiers. They wanted to learn resilience, not warfare. The same council that once mocked Earth's weakness now feared its strength of spirit. Even the word human started to change meaning in the common tongue. In some dialects, it became a verb. To human through it meant to keep going when everything hurts. On a distant moon, the Nael medic stood before a class of young trainees, recounting the day she met the human who smiled through pain. Her voice trembled. "He was dying, but he comforted us." One of the students asked, "Was he fearless?" She paused. "No, he was terrified. That's why it mattered." Her words echoed through the training halls, and for the first time, alien doctors began to measure not only the pulse of a patient, but the strength of their will. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Council tried diplomacy to contain the damage. They sent envoys bearing apologies disguised as treaties. The Terran Assembly listened but did not forget. Humanity had learned the value of being underestimated. They didn't boast. They built. Ships grew sleeker, colonies wider, and the word Terran fleet became synonymous with endurance rather than aggression. Ryan Voss declined promotions, preferring to train the next generation. "Strength isn't how much you can hit," he told his cadets. "It's how much you can take and still stand up with your humanity intact." And somewhere beyond the stars, in a hospital on a quiet Thaler world, a small plaque was mounted above the entrance. "In honor of the unbroken human, may we all learn to heal as he did." The galaxy didn't change overnight, but something fundamental shifted. Species that had never spoken to each other began to share their pain instead of hiding it. Even council commanders quietly adopted Terran phrases. "We endure," and every time a doctor faced a patient on the brink of death, they would remember the legend of a broken man who laughed at pain and refused to die just to spite the stars. Humanity had not won through weapons or dominance. They had won through their capacity to suffer and still choose compassion. In a galaxy built on power, they became the measure of endurance itself. And somewhere deep in Ryan Voss's memory, he could still hear the panicked voice of that first alien doctor shouting, "He should be dead," and his own answer, quiet and certain, "That's nothing." Months passed, but the legend of the broken human refused to fade. Across the galaxy, on space stations, mining colonies, and floating cities of glass, beings of every race whispered the same name, Ryan Voss, the man who endured 17 broken bones and still smiled. Some said he was immortal, others swore he was an experiment of a lost god. But those who had met him knew the truth. He was only human. And that was what frightened the Council most. Humanity had not crushed them with fleets or weapons, but with the terrifying simplicity of endurance. The Galactic Council chambers, once filled with arrogance, now echoed with doubt. Their leaders argued endlessly. "If one man can become a myth, imagine what his people could do," one ambassador hissed. Another, more cautious, replied, "Perhaps we should speak with them, not threaten them." But pride is a slow poison, and the Council had swallowed too much of it. In secret, they began sending spies into human space, hoping to learn what made the Terrans so resilient. What they found instead were farmers rebuilding on shattered worlds, engineers teaching aliens to fix their own ships, and children laughing with the same courage their parents had fought with. There were no monsters there, only people who refused to give up. On Earth, the Terran Assembly had changed too. The war with the Council had left scars, but not bitterness. Instead, humanity used its pain to build bridges. Hospitals named after alien worlds appeared in orbit, and Terran doctors began working side by side with alien healers. Among them was the Nael medic who once watched Ryan sleep in a med bay on the Seraphian. She came to Earth to learn from human surgeons, and when she walked through a human trauma center for the first time, she froze. The screams, the smell of blood, the chaos. It should have horrified her. Instead, she saw calm faces, steady hands, people working tirelessly under pressure. She saw them comforting the dying, not with words, but with presence. That night, she recorded a message to her old mentor. "They do not fear death because they never stopped living beside it. I thought strength was born from power, but here it comes from compassion." And somewhere in a quiet recovery ward of that same hospital, Commander Ryan Voss watched the sunrise through reinforced glass, his body still aching but alive. He smiled faintly at the light creeping across the horizon. 17 bones, he muttered to himself. And I'm still here. Guess the universe will have to try harder next time. His peace didn't last long. One morning, Captain Monroe entered his room with the grim look of a man carrying bad news. "The Council's moving again," he said. "There's unrest among their outer colonies. Some want independence, others want revenge. And they all keep quoting you." Ryan frowned. "Quoting me?" Monroe nodded. "They call it the unbroken creed. It's spreading faster than propaganda ever could." He handed Ryan a datapad filled with intercepted messages. Aliens of every species were repeating the same words. Pain is temporary. Purpose is forever. Ryan leaned back, rubbing his face. I didn't start this. Monroe looked at him quietly. No. You just showed them what it meant to be human. Silence filled the room for a long moment. Then Ryan said softly, "That's what scares them. We didn't show them power, we showed them meaning." The council, desperate to reclaim control, called for a diplomatic summit. For the first time in history, Earth was invited to speak as an equal member. The galaxy watched as a single Terran vessel approached the Great Council spire on Vyrek Prime, its silver hull reflecting the light of 3 suns. Ryan, still walking with a cane, was chosen to lead the delegation, not because he wanted to, but because no one else carried his weight. The aliens greeted him with uneasy silence as he entered the chamber, the same chamber that had once voted to sanction Earth. Thousands of eyes followed him as he stepped to the center. The council chair, an ancient being of translucent skin and tired pride, spoke first. "Commander Voss of Earth, the galaxy burns because of your kind. You turned endurance into defiance. You made our people question authority." Ryan's gaze was calm, his tone steady. "No, Chair, we didn't make them question. We reminded them they could." Murmurs rippled through the hall. "Your resilience inspires chaos," the chair pressed. "Then maybe your peace was built on fear," Ryan replied. The words hung in the air like thunder. "You see endurance as rebellion because you've forgotten what survival feels like. We've lived on worlds that tried to kill us every day. We didn't choose pain, we just stopped running from it. And that's why we're still here." The chamber fell silent. For the first time, the council had no answer. Outside, cameras broadcast his words to billions of viewers across the stars. On barren colonies and crowded cities alike, people, human and alien, stopped to listen. Ryan's voice was not loud, but it carried something stronger than command. "We're not perfect," he continued, "but we remember. Every scar, every mistake, every loss. It stays with us. We don't hide it. We use it. That's what it means to be human." When he finished, even the council guards stood frozen, their weapons forgotten at their sides. The broadcast spread across the galaxy, carried on every channel the council couldn't silence. For the first time in ages, hope outshone fear. Later that night, Ryan stood alone on the balcony of his quarters overlooking the alien city. The skyline shimmered with color, buildings that pulsed with bioluminescent life, ships weaving through the clouds like fireflies. He could hear faint echoes of the speech being replayed on distant speakers. The Nael medic approached quietly, her voice soft. "You changed them." He shook his head. "They changed themselves. I just reminded them how." She looked at him with that same awe she had felt months ago. "I thought pain made you dangerous. Now I see. It made you kind." Ryan smiled faintly. "It can do both, depending on what you do with it." For a while, neither spoke. The stars above Vyrek Prime shone brighter than he remembered, as though the universe itself was finally paying attention. When he returned to Earth, the galaxy was no longer the same. The Council fractured into smaller alliances built on cooperation instead of fear. Former enemies became allies, and for the first time in history, humanity was not the outcast, it was the example. But even as new peace blossomed, Ryan knew the lesson wasn't finished. "Pain never leaves," he told his cadets, standing before a class of new recruits. "It just waits to see what kind of person you'll become because of it." And as he looked out over the young faces before him, some human, some alien, he realized that the galaxy had begun to heal not because humanity conquered, but because it endured years past, and the galaxy began to forget how close it had come to tearing itself apart. Yet peace was a fragile thing, balanced on memories and the will of those who refused to let history repeat. Commander Ryan Voss, older now, his hair streaked with silver, served as humanity's reluctant ambassador to the rebuilt Galactic Council. He hated politics but understood why he had to be there. Someone had to remind the galaxy what endurance looked like when pride tried to erase it again. The council hall was different now. No longer carved in marble coldness but alive with light from every world that had joined the Remembrance Pact. Human engineers had helped rebuild it after the fires of revolt, filling its walls with glass panels that shimmered with the colors of 1,000 suns. Every time Ryan entered, he still felt the ghosts of that first day when the aliens stared at him like an intruder from a nightmare. Now they bowed their heads in respect. But even peace cannot silence fear forever. One morning, the alarms blared across the entire council city. Deep beneath the capital, a forgotten weapon from the old regime, the pulse core, had reawakened. The ancient device, built to erase rebellious systems in a single wave of energy, was charging again after centuries of silence. Panic spread. Council delegates shouted. Old enemies blamed each other. And fleets scrambled uselessly above the planet. Only Ryan remained calm, standing at the center of the chaos, his cane tapping lightly on the stone floor. "Running won't save you," he said quietly. "It never has." They turned to him, desperate. "You can't stop it," one shouted. Ryan looked toward the great window where the planet's core glowed faintly through the clouds. "Maybe not alone," he said. "But we don't do alone anymore." Within hours, a joint Terran Council team was assembled. Old soldiers, alien engineers, and human scientists descended into the planet's heart, where molten light pulsed through endless caverns. The heat was unbearable. Radiation levels would kill most within minutes. Ryan should not have gone, but he did anyway. "This started with us," he said, adjusting the seal on his battered pressure suit. "We finish it together." The Nael medic, now commander of the Joint Medical Corps, grabbed his arm. "Your body won't survive the exposure," she warned. He smiled faintly, the same way he had in that med bay years ago. "That's what they said last time." The descent was a nightmare of shaking tunnels and burning air. The deeper they went, the louder the pulse core roared, an ocean of light ready to drown a world. When they reached the control chamber, the readings were catastrophic. "It's self-aware," one engineer whispered. "It sees us as the virus it was built to erase." Ryan stared at the living machine, its surface shifting like liquid metal, whispering in forgotten codes. "Then we remind it what it was made to protect," he said, stepping forward despite the searing heat. The others shouted for him to stop, but he walked into the light, every step heavier, every breath harder. Memories flooded his mind, his crash, the med bay, the alien doctors, the laughter through pain. The voice of the machine spoke inside his head. "You cannot survive this." He answered aloud, his voice calm even as his suit cracked from the heat. "I've heard that before." The pulse core shuddered, trying to resist him, flooding the chamber with raw energy. Ryan reached its heart and placed his hand on the surface. "Listen," he whispered. "You were built to destroy pain. But pain isn't the enemy. It's the proof that we're still alive." The machine hesitated, confused by the emotion it could not quantify. Around him, alarms screamed as containment failed, but his voice cut through the roar. "You want balance? Here it is, every world that burned, every species that bled, every human who stood up again. We remember them all." The core's light flickered, dimmed, then pulsed one final time before going still. The energy that should have consumed the planet dispersed into the clouds like rain. Above, the night sky ignited with ribbons of color as if the world itself exhaled. When the rescue teams reached the chamber, they found Ryan lying beside the darkened engine. His body broken but his heartbeat steady. Slow, stubborn, alive. The Nael medic knelt beside him, tears shining in her luminous eyes. "Why?" she whispered. His lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "Because someone had to remind it we don't quit." He survived again, barely, and when he awoke days later, the council city was quiet. Delegates from every species stood waiting. No speeches, no applause, just silence filled with gratitude too deep for words. The council chair stepped forward and bowed. "You have done what none of us could. You gave the galaxy back its courage." Ryan looked out the window at the sunrise spreading across the alien sky. "No," he said softly. "I just showed it that pain doesn't mean the end." From that day, the pulse core was not dismantled but left dormant beneath the city, guarded by an inscription written in every known language. "Here sleeps the heart that learned to feel." Years later, when Ryan Voss was gone and the stars turned over their ages again, travelers from across the galaxy would visit a small monument on Earth. It stood on a quiet hill beneath a tree, simple and unpolished. The plaque read, "He smiled through 17 broken bones and taught us to stand." Children touched the stone and asked, "Was he real?" And their parents answered, "Yes, but more importantly, so can you be." And far away, in the great archives of the Galactic Council, the record of the human who refused to die was stored under a single word, humanity. And somewhere in the endless dark between stars, perhaps in the echo of old machinery or the whisper of drifting starlight, a faint voice still murmured with quiet pride, "That's nothing." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more HFY and sci-fi stories about humanity, courage, and the unbreakable spirit that keeps us reaching for the stars.